1. I'm John Miglash for the WDMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. We're going to delve into deep learning, dive deep today as we did yesterday. But, you know, we got a little distracted as always. So I started with this Forbes article yesterday, what deep learning for marketers means, okay? And, you know, it doesn't really have a lot of content, I have to say. It's just not, you know, it's just a nice little overview. I over the years, I've learned that most of the stuff you read is just a nice overview. The people writing it are not necessarily marketers. They're not necessarily statisticians. And most importantly, they don't have that sick feeling in their stomach of mailing 1 million pieces and hoping that they were right. Or 5 million at a pop. So what the first model we ever did was, the first real model for the first real mailer was for Cabela's. And we were just having a devil of a time because, first of all, we didn't know what we were doing. That's the first problem. No one had really ever done what we were trying to do, which was to build a system that could build models, not just to build a model, but that you could say, okay, what do the fishermen look like, or what do the hunters look like? No one, as far as we knew, had ever done that. No one was advertising that they'd done it. It was hard enough just to build something. And, you know, in those days, a model might take months. And we were trying to do them in days or weeks. And I noticed on the next article that was in the news on Tuesday that the model took a few months, but they were trying to get it down to a few weeks. I thought, good Lord, we were doing this in 1994. Anyway, so we didn't really know what we were doing. We were really nervous. And we were up against a horrible timeline. We ended up having to rent a plane and fly the tape. We had it on some kind of tape because the service bureau who was going to use the model who needed the mailing list, we were generating a mailing list, didn't have FTP transfer or anything. You know, we taught a lot of printers. We taught how to do that because we were sick of renting airplanes. Anyway, and I said to Cabela's, to Sharon Robeson, I said, she was the first employee that the Cabela's, Mary and Dick hired. Anyway, she'd been there a while. She had her 50th anniversary a couple of years back, and it was some nice articles about her. Sharon, if you're out there, give me a call. Same number. Anyway, I said to Sharon, do you have a backup plan? I mean, wouldn't it be good to pull the names off your system too in case we fail miserably or the plane goes down in flames? And she said, no, the worst you can do is better than the best we're doing. And you know, we talk about spurious correlations and common sense. It's really difficult to tell what's common and what's not. We had no recency in the model to speak of. And I called up Tim Mabey, who was PhD and statistician, and it was working at Neiman Marcus. And Tim said, and I said to Tim, if recency isn't in the model, what's up? Is that good or bad? He said, throw it away. It can't possibly be right. And this is the problem you run into in modeling. You don't know what is real and what isn't real. The machine says there's a correlation or there's no correlation, so you throw it in there anyway. Well, anyway, it took me a while to figure this out because we went back and double-checked everything. And like I said, we were up against this horrible deadline. It was going to be 5 million pieces of mail. That's like, you know, it may have been $5 million worth of a bet on our technology. You know, they didn't pay us that, but that's what it costs if you're wrong. You mess up a model. I worked with American Science and what was American Science and I don't remember the name of it. But anyway, Surplus. That's it. Yeah, it's like an Army surplus for science wear, and they put in a new version, a Linux version of the Smith-Gardner system, and they used its RFM system, and the system actually pulled the opposite. It pulled the oldest names who had spent the least and bought the fewest times. So it almost put them out of business, just that one thing. And it was just like for 2 months. So it's a big deal putting this stuff in the mail. Anyway, so I called Tim and he said, can't possibly be right. We're up against this huge deadline. And suddenly it occurred to me that if you're pulling the fishing names in the 1st of December, you know, the hunting season is like Thanksgiving around here, the gun season. So all of a sudden the light went off that if you're pulling the names right after Thanksgiving, who are we getting? Who are the most recent buyers? The hunters. Okay? And so all of a sudden this light went off and I said, oh, I get it. The hunters aren't the fishermen. We were trying to get fishermen. The fishermen aren't recent. The fishermen bought a year ago. I mean, they're more recent than, you know, but they weren't the most recent. They weren't the hotline. And I'd learned this in the holiday mailings, that sometimes if you're pulling a holiday mailing in September, you don't want the hotline, which is, you know, March, April. You want last year's fourth quarter buyers, especially in business to business. So anyway, after this breakthrough, and now I've gone off on this rabbit trail, you're going to get a rabbit trail video today. But it's an interesting story. It's in my book. I wanted to pitch that a little. This isn't even the latest copy I have. This is the first original print, Spinning Straw into Gold. They messed up the title. It was a horrible print job, but it's the idea. Spinning Straw into Gold. The story's in there along with dozens of other stories about real, actual, in-the-mail events. So, anyway, it was because of seasonality that the main variable that you'd always think would always be in there wasn't in there. Okay, which brings us to another article about ANZ Bank. And they were working on a deep learning environment, but they said it becomes very difficult to work out the factors that were the most predictive for this instance or this customer. Neural net AI, deep learning, is patterned after the way they think the brain works. But unfortunately, they don't know how the brain works. So they're building a model of a model and don't know what's going on. And in neural net, you don't really know how the nodes are getting formed. It gets formed by repetitive connection. But it's not a brain. It's not nuanced. It's binary. Whereas the brain has 1,000 different kinds of synapses. And I've talked about that before. Look on LinkedIn. But the great part, whoops, why isn't this supposed to be I'm supposed to be showing you this. Dang it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. This is the technology. Let's see if anything else. Yeah, this one works and this one works. We talked about this. Here's spurious correlations. Just Google that. Some of these are so great. You know, I love the one, number of people who drowned by falling into a pool, films Nicolas Cage appeared in. Per capita cheese consumption versus the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. Now there is a correlation for you. And the more you throw into these hoppers, the more they're going to pick up something like this that's a super strong correlation, 94.71, or an R value, for you statisticians out there, of 0.947091. What could be better? The trouble is it won't work in the real world. And that's what this ANZ article basically says. Oh, this one was the one I set up. Okay, just so you see it. They don't know what the variables are being used in the node formation. And even worse, down here at the end, it's great. And they said, we got to be careful. We don't know what the thing is doing. They had an illustration of, they did fire hydrants, red and green. But the green ones were in a different country and were designed a little different. And the machine figured out the difference between the two, but it wasn't the color. And when you photoshopped a typical American red hydrant, it said a red fire hydrant, and it said it because it was the shape of the other one. So the point is, be careful. ANZ, and this is this week's news, ANZ says we can't trust this stuff. Right. We can't trust this stuff. So get a real human in front of your neural net in front of your deep learning and watch on your budget. Hire somebody who knows what they're doing rather than spending millions of dollars with IBM's Watson. I'm John Miglash for the WDMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing.